Have you ever had your front door blown off by your HOA? What if the people enforcing the rules were acting like a SWAT team, without any real authority? And what would you do if the man they tried to intimidate turned out to be a Navy SEAL's father? This isn't just a story about a busted door. It's about a neighborhood tyrant, a son with military precision, and the moment power finally got put in its place. Keep watching, because what happened next, even the HOA didn't see it coming. I used to think the suburbs were safe, quiet, predictable, the kind of place where people argued over lawn, heights, and parking violations. Not where you'd find yourself, face down on your welcome mat with your front door in splinters. It was 6:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because the coffee was still brewing when the explosion hit. My front door, blown off its hinges, and through the dust and panic I heard boots. Not police, not military. Just a bunch of overzealous rent-a-cops in HOA-branded tactical vests. Yes, the Homeowners Association. They called it an emergency inspection, but I call it what it was, an ambush. And then they saw him. Standing behind me in the haze of drywall and righteous fury was my son, 6'2", 20 years in the Navy, just back from active duty. They didn't know. They didn't expect him, but he was about to teach them the kind of discipline they never learned in their little HOA rulebook. You see, this wasn't just about a broken door. It was about power, control, entitlement dressed in a polo shirt. And while they thought they were enforcing neighborhood safety, they forgot one thing. I've been documenting everything. And with my son back home, it was time to turn the rules against the rulers. And believe me, by the end of this story, no one will ever knock on my door the same way again. Let me take you back. Before the door blew off, before my son came home, before things got ridiculous. We moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago. Quiet cul-de-sac, decent schools, homes that all looked like they were copied and pasted from a brochure. It was my retirement dream, until I met Greg. Greg is the HOA president. Mid-40s, shaved head, always holding a walkie-talkie like it's a badge. Think Paul Blart meets Petty Tyrant. From day one, Greg had a problem with me. Not because I was loud or messy. No, my trash bins were visible from the curb on a Wednesday. Then it was my mailbox paint being 2 shades too dark. I wish I were joking. You agreed to the CC&Rs when you moved in, he'd say, smug behind aviators. We just enforce the rules. Sure, Greg, and North Korea just encourages teamwork. At first I complied, repainted the mailbox, moved the bins, even trimmed a hedge that was violating perimeter symmetry. But I noticed something. My house was being targeted. While my neighbors left junk on their porches, let weeds grow, and even had unapproved flagpoles, Greg only cited me. Then came the notices, printed like parking tickets. Violation warnings. Urgent action required. One morning I found 6 of them zip-tied to my front door, like some kind of suburban ransom note. I confronted Greg, calmly. Is this about me? Or are you just bored? His smirk told me everything. Oh, I don't make the rules, he said. But I do have authority to enforce them. For the safety of the community. Safety? 2 days later, I caught one of their HOA compliance officers, basically Greg's cousin with a flashlight, snooping around my backyard. Said he was inspecting my fence line. That's when I installed cameras. 3 of them, discreet, motion-activated, and every week, they gave me footage of Greg and his buddies circling my house like vultures in polos. But I stayed quiet, until one Friday night my son called. He was coming home from deployment. No warning. Just said, "Don't make a big deal, Dad. Just be there." I smiled, because I knew something these neighborhood clowns didn't. He wasn't the boy who left. He was coming back a SEAL, and he wasn't the type to tolerate injustice. The next morning, a bright yellow notice appeared. Urgent security. Risk. Mandatory interior HOA. Inspection scheduled Tuesday, 6:15 a.m. An inspection of my home? Without cause? Without consent? I called Greg, no answer. I emailed the board, silence, so I prepared. Set up every camera, backed up all footage, and told my son everything. He just nodded and said, "Let them come." And oh, they did. That yellow paper? That wasn't the last thing they'd try to shove. Through my door, Tuesday, 6:15 a.m. The air was thick with tension. My son was upstairs preparing for something I didn't even know he had planned. But I had no doubt it would be interesting. The HOA cops were coming. And the moment they knocked, things were going to escalate fast. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't the usual soft tap of a doorbell. It was the pounding that made my stomach drop. The kind of knock that signals we're in charge. But I didn't flinch. I walked to the door, opened it just enough to see who was on the other side. Greg, of course. Greg, and this time he wasn't alone. There were 3 others with him, one holding a clipboard, one filming, and one with a huge pair of bolt cutters, slung over his shoulder, like he was preparing to invade a vault. Mr. Narrator's name. "We're here for the inspection," Greg said, voice thick with authority, looking over my shoulder into the house like it was a zoo. "You've had numerous violations and we're here to rectify them." I gave him a look, a casual glance that said everything. But Greg wasn't backing down. "You'll need to open the door wide for us to complete our work." Mr. Narrator's name. I didn't open it. Instead, I turned to my son, standing silently behind me, still in his Navy SEAL gear. A quiet storm ready to break. I barely gave him a nod, but he understood. "What's this about?" I asked, stepping aside but keeping the door between us. "You don't just blow through people's..." "Doors like this." Greg smirked. "We have a safety inspection. Standard procedure. If you don't comply, there will be consequences." I swallowed a laugh, barely holding back the urge to toss out some sarcastic remark. But it wasn't time for jokes, not yet. "You really think you're the law around here, don't you, Greg?" I asked. He looked me in the eye and smirked again. "We enforce the rules, for the good of the neighborhood." His gaze flickered to the camera crew behind him. It felt like the opening scene of some weird reality show, where the only thing missing was the dramatic music. Then the door exploded. There was no warning. No countdown, just a sudden, deafening blast as the door was blasted open from the outside, with enough force to make the hinges scream. My hands flew up instinctively to shield my face, but I was too late. Splinters rained down like confetti. My front entryway was now a battlefield. I staggered back, eyes wide, trying to make sense of what just happened. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps. Not from Greg or his goons, but from above. My son appeared at the top of the stairs. At first they didn't see him. Greg was too busy celebrating his tactical victory of blowing up my door. The idiot. But when he turned to face the room, it was like something out of a movie. My son descended the stairs, all 6'2" of him. Navy SEAL issue attitude written in every inch of his posture. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Greg stammered. My son's voice was calm, dead calm. "You just blew up my father's door. I don't think you understand what that means." The energy shifted in an instant. These were men used to intimidation, used to bullying people who had no recourse. And now they were standing in the shadow of a man who had survived situations they'd never even seen. I could see Greg's expression falter as my son stepped forward. He was calm, methodical, a trained professional who had seen worse than a bunch of middle-aged neighborhood vigilantes. Greg started to speak, but my son cut him off. "You're trespassing," he said, his voice smooth. "But the weight of it wasn't lost on anyone. And you've just made a very big mistake. You should leave, now." But Greg wasn't backing down yet. He stepped forward, trying to hold his ground. But the truth was, this wasn't his battlefield anymore. "Get them out of here," my son said quietly, his gaze never leaving Greg's. One of the other HOA cops, the guy with the bolt cutters, took a step toward my son, trying to intimidate him with his size. It was laughable, a Navy SEAL against a man with a tool for cutting chains. Then came the first break in their composure. The bolt cutter guy hesitated. My son didn't flinch. That hesitation was all it took. "You're out of line, Greg," I said, stepping forward. "You just crossed a line no one should ever cross." I pointed to the camera crew behind them. "You're on film, and so is everything you've done here. How's the neighborhood looking now, huh?" Greg's face drained of color. The cameras had picked up every word, every act of aggression. And it was then that I knew this wasn't just about getting my door fixed. This was about power, control, and the world wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. That was just the beginning. Truth hits harder when you're subscribed. Stick around, more justice is coming.